Good afternoon. About 4 minutes. Good afternoon. Hope everybody is doing well. And let's definitely give him a big hip hip huzzah for this incredible lunch that I will eventually get to eat once I finish you. So I go hip hip, you give me a loud huzzah. Hip hip! All right. As Brittany says, my name is Mike Burgess. This is my 33rd year in the classroom, which the assisted living community that's here, I didn't know if they came for me finally. I might need that. I have been at River Bluff High School since we opened in 2013. Later in this presentation, I am going to stop for a second and point out that we are now probably the only high school in South Carolina, I know we are, maybe even in the country, that has its own Revolutionary War site that has been opened up to the public through the efforts of myself, our principal, South Carolina 250th, etc. And so, because it plays a part in our story. Quote, I was well acquainted with Rawdon's talents. I loved him as a friend and knew he was the only man of integrity in General Clinton's family. So today I come to do something new, and this is a brand new presentation. So we're interested to see what hits and what doesn't. And it literally started from two questions. The first question is Brittany saying, if you want to come back to Camden, because I love coming here at least a couple times a year, would you mind doing Rawdon? And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll be happy to do that. There's not much out there on Rawdon. There's no stellar biography and things of that nature. And then I was really hooked into this research, into really committing to doing not just a great job for y'all, and so I get invited back and I get the free lunch versus you do really bad, you walk up, we don't have any food for you. But the question came from one of my students, and it was, hey Burgess, although I had to correct him as Coach Burgess, who do you think was the best British commander in South Carolina? And I thought about that. And I thought about Cornwallis. But it's hard to give it to Cornwallis, considering he abandoned South Carolina, totally violating orders, and then manages to get himself trapped at a little place called Yorktown. I thought about Tarleton, and some of you perhaps have heard my Tarleton presentation. I do speak highly of him, but it's also hard to do Tarleton when you have cowpens. When you have cowpens. It's hard to say he was the best when he got an entire portion of his army destroyed. Ferguson, not even in the running. Because if you get yourself surrounded and annihilated by the mountain people, which my daddy always told me, don't mess with the mountain people. Evidently, Ferguson's daddy did not impart that wisdom to him. And you get yourself annihilated, urinated on, and buried with your girlfriend, you cannot be the best commander in South Carolina. And so my answer to this student was Lord Francis Rawdon. And it's because over the years I've developed, it's not revolutionary in any way, but 5 criteria for effective military leadership. That an effective military leader should have tactical speed, operational simplicity, boldness of action, strategic intelligence, and be personally brave and courageous. And while Cornwallis, Tarleton, and Ferguson might check some of these boxes, my thesis, my argument today is that Rawdon checks all of the boxes. Now, when you think of Rawdon, I compare him to a meteor. Now, part of it is I was obsessed, like perhaps some of you were, with the launch of Artemis 2. I wasn't around for the moon landing, but I was around for the entire space shuttle program. And so space was on my mind when I was developing this talk. And I learned there are 3 stages of a meteor. And the first is it begins as a meteoroid. And so I compared Rawdon to a meteor because, like a meteor, he briefly shines brightly here in South Carolina. And that is, of course, our focus. But his beginnings are, he is born, as one biographer wrote, with a silver spoon in his mouth. On December 9th, 1754, at Moira, County Down. And his parents are John, 1st Earl of Moira, Elizabeth Hastings, the 13th Baroness of Hastings. He is born into nobility. And he is born into Protestant nobility, even though he is being raised in Ireland. His church is a part of the Church of Ireland. And as any good noble in the British crown, he is going to be educated in Oxford at University College, where he meets another fellow student who will share his experiences in one Bannister Tarleton. Now, for both of them, they share something else. They both drop out, and they both join the military, though in different branches. That Rawdon joins in 1771 as an ensign in the 15th Foot. He will later in 1773, in October, join the 5th Foot, and then he will sail to America with the 5th Foot in May of 74. At the time of the attempt of British General Thomas Gage to enforce the Coercive Acts in a time of great turmoil that will culminate at Lexington and Concord. Rawdon will be at Lexington and Concord, and he will serve there, but it's another engagement as part of this campaign in and around Boston that gives him his great fame and notoriety. And that is Bunker Hill, where afterwards, gentleman Johnny Burgoyne comments that Lord Rawdon has this day stamped his fame for life. He enters the battle as a lieutenant. He is in the 2nd and 3rd assaults on Breed's Hill, and he will lead his company of the 5th in the 3rd assault after the commander of the company, Captain Harris, is wounded. During this assault, as his men begin to waver, he takes this first act of bravery and courage and rallies his men by grabbing the regimental colors and standing atop the wall to hold them together where he will be wounded. This catches the attention of not only his British comrades, but after the war, painter John Trumbull and his painting of the death of Dr. Joseph Warren. Over here, behaving heroically, is Lord Francis Rawdon. And his act makes this very pro-American legendary painting where he is seen as behaving heroically. He will continue on in his military career to be an aide-de-camp to George Clinton until they have a falling out, as all the aide-de-camps do with George Clinton, or Henry Clinton, excuse me, in the fall of 1779. And then he will come, not in the first wave of the British invasion of South Carolina, but he will come in the second wave of the British version of South Carolina in the attempt to take Charleston. And in doing so, he will do this with a new regiment that he is the commander of, the Volunteers of Ireland, where he is appointed by Clinton, they're still on good terms, as the commander of the Volunteers of Ireland with a lieutenant colonel commission in May of 1778. And this will be a provincial unit composed of Irish deserters and Irish loyalists. They will immediately see combat together on June 28, 1778 at the Battle of Monmouth, and would head south in the late winter and early spring of 1780, where they would participate with the siege of Charleston. But in heading south, Rawdon is perhaps completely unaware, as is Cornwallis, as is Nathaniel Greene, as is anyone coming to the north, to the cauldron in which he enters. And this is where you'll have to put your chips and sandwich down, and we're going to be interactive with a quiz, because everybody loves the quiz. So I'm going to read the statement, and we want to identify whether we believe the officer in the statement is either on the British side or the Patriot side. And let's see how we do in looking at just a snippet of the turmoil and the savagery and the violence that exists in South Carolina. So, number one, and then I will call for a show of hands. An officer wrote that after a successful raid, he took no prisoners because he did not have time to do so, nor did he have time to parole them. If you believe this is a British officer, raise your hands. Okay. Patriot officer. All right. It is Patriot. It is William Richardson Davie at Wahab's plantation, and alongside him is a future president of the United States in Andrew Jackson, getting an education in the art of war. Number two, and this was ironic because I went back and forth to which event this is. An officer hacked all but 2 men to death of a surrendering force of 30 men. If you believe it's a British officer, raise your hand. Patriot. It is an American loyalist by the name of Bloody Bill Cunningham. And the reason I say you could have picked one or the other, he does this at Hays Station, but it starts with a hanging, so I fudged a little bit. But he also does this in Clouds Creek in modern-day Saluda County, where he hacks people to death and gets tired and tosses his subordinate and the sword to finish. Number three. Now this time, we're going to identify the victim as British or Patriot. An officer home on leave is assassinated in his front yard while holding his baby. On the 7th, no less. So is this victim, is he British, loyalist, patriot? You ain't gonna raise your hands for one or the other. You're like, I'm not raising my hand. That's like when you have multiple choice and there's A, B, C, and D, and a student asks, is there an E option? And I'm like, no. So the officer is Captain Johannes Kinsler. His brother-in-law, is a gentleman you'll learn more about, is Godfrey Dreer Jr. And Kinsler is assassinated by a local Tory in his front yard. Now, number 4, we'll go back to perpetrator. An officer summarily executed a neighbor who killed his brother-in-law. I think I gave this one away. Who's the guilty party? The British. Patriots. Yeah, it's the Patriots. It's Godfrey Dreer seeking a Hatfield McCoy-like retribution on the Tory that allegedly killed his brother-in-law, Johannes Kinsler. And then finally, an officer is quoted as saying that we should give free liberty to the soldiers to ravage at will, that these infatuated wretches may feel what a calamity war is. Is it a British officer? Raise your hand, some of you, okay. Patriot. It is a British officer. And it's Lord Francis Rawdon. He will take where Ferguson believes he can talk the backcountry into submission. Rawdon will take a more hardline approach to this, along with his buddy from Oxford, Bannister Tarleton. And so when we talk about Rawdon, and we talk about the Volunteers of Ireland, and you have to talk about August 16th, 1780. Because whether you're talking about Cornwallis or Tarleton or Webster on the right flank or Baron de Kalb or Horatio Speedy Gates as he flies away, the man that gets forgotten in the Camden story and doesn't get the credit he deserves is Rawdon. Who commands the British left. And even here, he is somewhat humble about his command. He says, in the battle which ensued, I behaved either better or worse than my neighbors. However, on the left, his Irish Volunteers, British Legion Infantry, Hamilton's North Carolina Regiment, Bryan's North Carolina Volunteers, are facing the cream of the crop of the Southern Continental Army in the Delaware and 2nd Maryland. And yet he holds his own. Constantly a back and forth between he and DeKalb. They're dueling on foot on the battlefield until the militia breaks and here comes the sledgehammer. Rawdon is the amble that day. Had his loyalist troops faltered in the face of these well-drilled and trained Continentals, you could have had a different outcome, perhaps a stalemate. But Rawdon does his job. But this is not why I call him the Meteor. Rawdon the Meteor, I think, the bright shining light, is when he is left in command of the British forces in the back country of South Carolina, as Cornwallis begins his ill-fated pursuit of Greene in the race to the Dan, culminating in a disastrous battle, right? Another such victory would be the destruction of the British Army at Guilford Courthouse, before he makes a strategic blunder and marching to Virginia, abandoning the Carolinas, and he leaves Rawdon in command with limited troops to hold the same territory that Cornwallis, he himself, struggled to hold. And in this, we begin to see the brilliance of Rawdon. Beginning in late February, with Thomas Sumter, the Gamecock, laying siege on February 19th to Fort Granby on the west side of the Congaree River. Rawdon sees an opportunity, not just to save the garrison, but he sees an opportunity to trap Sumter. And he just misses. He dispatches the 64th Regiment to cut across modern-day Columbia minus the current traffic. And then he himself crosses 3 rivers, the Wateree, the Broad, and then he crosses the Saluda River down at the bottom of my campus at River Bluff High School on the 22nd. He is one of several military leaders to cross with a force through our campus and not get stopped by the students' #1 scourge, the golf cart guy. And he just misses Sumter. Sumter gets intelligence, hey, he just crossed at the Saluda, and Sumter heads south. But again, it's brilliance. It's just not enough to push on to Friday's Ferry and relieve the garrison. He seeks to trap Sumter. But it's truly Hobkirk's Hill that we see Rawdon's brilliance and his boldness, in which, prior to Greene's arrival outside of Camden, Rawdon has 500 effective troops. Greene is going to have close to 1,500 or more. And yet, Rawdon first reinforced by the SC Royalists, 630, okay, that gets you a little closer. Instead of waiting for Greene to perhaps cut his supply line, instead of waiting for Greene to perhaps lay siege, Rawdon is determined to take the initiative. And to do so, he wants to maximize his firepower. And so if you could walk, you carried a musket. Whether you were the walking wounded, the walking sick, you're a drummer, you're a bugler, you were going as a group, the convalescents, to attack Greene. And Greene with the high ground. And Rawdon doesn't do, hey, did a little up through the middle in plain sight. He takes advantage of the wooded terrain. And you have some controversy over whether Greene was surprised or not. But eyewitnesses there said, yeah, we were surprised. Yes, Greene had his men lying in order of battle, but many of them were bathing and did not return to the ranks. Many of them were eating breakfast. And this undermanned force by Rawdon is able on this day to defeat Greene. And no, I'm not just going to do what Greene does and blame Colonel Gumby for his failure to keep the 1st Maryland in line. It's Rawdon seizing the initiative, maximizing his manpower, using the element of surprise, and catching Greene off guard. There are other instances where Rawdon takes the initiative and is willing to take chances. One involves Rawdon's heading to 96 in June. And this is a daunting situation for Rawdon. Let me share with you the condition that Rawdon is in physically in early June 1781 as Nathaniel Greene lays siege to 96, and Rawdon is determined to save the garrison. But here is his physical health. Rawdon writes, I am by no means now in a state of health fit to undertake the business upon which I am going. But as my knowledge of the country and my acquaintance with the inhabitants make me think I can effect it better than any person here, I am determined to attempt it. He is unwilling to hand this off to one of his subordinates, and he is going to lead it himself, although he is certainly suffering from malaria. Indeed, he has high hopes as he musters 1,800 infantry, which has him outnumbering Greene's regulars. And on June 7, he says, I marched this night and have great hopes of saving Kruger. But that's not just enough for him, because he has Patriot militia nipping at his heels, harassing his foragers. And so he sets a trap. He sets a trap in what is today modern-day Gilbert, which you could still set a trap in modern-day Gilbert. But he has Charles Middleton's Patriot mounted infantry and cavalry nipping at his heels, and he is going to trap them. And I will read the report from Sumter himself. And Sumter writes that Middleton comes up and engages about 200 mounted infantry. And Middleton thinks he has caught this small rear guard unit and quickly goes on the attack. But then, with Middleton engaged, believing he is, as Sumter writes, within prospect of cutting off the foragers, at the same time, their cavalry, Rawdon's cavalry, charged Middleton in the flank and rear, and as Sumter writes, soon broke him to pieces. Middleton starts with a force of a couple hundred he returns to camp with 45. It is a major, major defeat on the road, on this effort to slow Rawdon. Rawdon has dispatched this force of patriots that was impeding his progress from the rear by using classic partisan tactics. Draw them in, hit them in the flank and rear. And so at Juniper Springs, Rawdon shines brightly. He goes on to successfully relieve the garrison at 96. He gives some chase to Greene, but because of the heat and the conditions, pulls back to 96. He gives the loyalists there a choice. You can stay, I will leave a small detachment, or we will escort you back. And he will do, and that will be the choice. And John Harris Kruger will take via the long way back to Charleston with these evacuees, and Rawdon will march to Granby, where he arrives on July 1st. And at this point, the meteorite crashes the earth with a long week in July and a long month of July. He arrives on July 1st at 11 o'clock that evening at Granby, hoping to surprise the militia garrison there, which has Patriot garrison, which is skedaddled. He has 800 infantry, he has 60 cavalry in the form of the SC Royalists. And then the week goes awry. On July 2nd, a company of the SC Royalists is detached from Granby to visit Dreer's farm. That would be Godfrey Dreer Sr., located at the intersection of Saluda River and 12 Mile Creek, as you can see on the River Bluff campus. Their goal is to destroy the mill there, that this has been a Patriot militia base, and if possible, to capture Godfrey Dreer Jr., who is 19 or 20 years old. He is in the Patriot militia, and he has killed a Tory, executed a Tory. 2 British officers dismount in Dreer's front yard, walk, and the cabin would have been here, that's the chimney fall, kick in the door, and there is Godfrey Dreer Jr. with a musket, and his brother John, who is 15. They blow the first officer away, they blow the second officer away, and then Godfrey Dreer Jr., who will earn the nickname Wild Godfrey Dreer, charges out of the house and scatters the other 28. What you can't, this is, we have opened up the terrain for the site. You see we have erected a flag, and what you can't see is on a man-made overlook because of the creation of the school. Thanks to the SC 250th, we now have an interpretive marker there. And so we literally have our very own tiny Rev War military park. If you believe the Ken Burns documentary, there were 102 military engagements in South Carolina, and River Bluff High School has one, and it's the first of a couple incidents that week that undoes Rawdon. The second one, and perhaps more important one in terms of Rawdon, happens the very next day, on July 3rd, where tracking Rawdon's withdrawal to Granby has been Colonel Light Horse Harry Lee. He sends his subordinate, Joseph Eagleston, with a detachment to get around Rawdon and get to the foraging country, which is along the old state road, heading to Sandy Run and what is today St. Matthews, and does so at a place called the Hoggabook Swamp, roughly about a mile beyond the Congaree Creek. And I will read an account in the history of the Regiment of the South Carolina Royalists of this engagement. On 3rd July, at a farm below Friday's Ferry, a foraging party of around 60 dragoons of the Royalists under Lieutenant James Sutherland were ambushed and routed by Captain Joseph Eagleston's detachment of Lee's Legion. 40 of the Royalists were captured, but not without a fight. It is reported by one source that Lieutenant Sutherland behaved with a degree of valor bordering on excess, and was left for dead, a piece of his skull having been removed by a patriot saber. Miraculously, he survived and recovered his wound. The actual losses are upward of 45 of the 60 dragoons, with 0 casualties on Eggleston's part, and the loss of much of the wagons needed to transport Rawdon's army. Oh, and what is not mentioned in this account, because it's a history of the South Carolina Royalists, is what is mentioned in Rawdon's letter to Cornwallis. He had given express orders for them not to go out. So you're now seeing a bit of an unraveling of discipline in this force. Rawdon is sick, it's hot, it's humid, they're short on supplies, and now Rawdon is without horse. On July 4th, Lee has gotten around, and this is 1781, gotten around Rawdon and blocking the creek. Rawdon is desperate and is able to outflank them using the banks of the Congaree and come up from behind and clear Lee out of the way, affecting Rawdon's escape. But at this point, Rawdon is in terrible health, and in late July 1781 will give up his command. But his luck continues to be bad. On the way home, he is captured by Admiral de Grasse. He will eventually be exchanged, and he will return home, not in obscurity, but to an active life. He will serve in the Irish Parliament. He will more successfully be the Governor General of India, establishing British control over that region. He will get married at age 50. So the statement of the ugliest man in the British Army, perhaps at age 50, he has aged well, to Flora Campbell. They will have 6 children, 4 daughters. 1 son will die in infancy, and 1 son will live and die at the age of 26. He is named governor of Malta in 1824 and would die at sea. In an unusual custom, I suppose, Rawdon's wife has his right hand cut off and preserved so when she dies, their hands will be clasped together. And Rawdon does die on November 28, 1826. So, don't let me tell you about his legacy. We're going to poll you guys in a moment. But consider Lord Charles Cornwallis' evaluation of him. His lordship's great abilities, courage, and firmness of mind cannot be sufficiently admired and applauded. So now we're going to finish with something we do with my students. It's called Fist of 5. 5 is the highest score you can give. Fist is a 0, and you've got to hold them up. Okay? So from this short presentation, let's see where you would grade him on my 5 criteria for effective military leadership. And you just hold your hands up. Fist of 5. You can do a 3, you can do a 2, you can do a 4. If you want to cut your finger in half, so that's really creepy, you can do that as well. On tactical speed, where are you? Fist of 5. Okay. Operational simplicity. I see people not voting. You got to vote. You got to vote. You got to vote. Don't make me call you out. All right. Boldness of action. Okay. Fair enough. Bravery and courage. All right. And strategic intelligence. Okay. So he grades well. And with that, and I see you have finished your lovely lunch. Should I look forward to this? Okay, good. If you want to stay in the loop, I'll put this back up. This connects to my website. Or if you want to go, actually, this one is probably the better way to do it. I also have business cards. Again, here in the 250th, I know every group wants a speaker. And hey, I want to speak. I lamented to my wife the other day that from this talk to July 4th, I only speak 6 times. And she looks at me like, that's a lot. I said, no, the 250th only comes once, and we're not going to be around for the 300. So if you know any groups, etc., I appreciate it. Brittany, do we want to take a few minutes for questions?
Yes, if anybody has a few questions.
All right, and my rule on questions is the same rule I give my students. I am not interested in speeches, okay? Because guess what? I don't want to make you sad. Nobody else in here is either, okay? So frame it as a question so we can honor people's time and I can eventually have lunch. We got 2 legends here. Let's see, you got Tom Elmore, excellent author, writer, and Kip Carter, who even though he didn't know I was there, let myself and a gentleman by the name of John Allison and his metal detecting team rumpus around his yard on an 85-degree day. I found Kip nothing but junk. And John found something else. Well, I'm going to go with the guy that let me rumpus around his yard, unless you want me to come to your yard, which also might be creepy. All right, go ahead.
Was Rawdon in India at the same time as Cornwallis?
No, there's not an overlap.
Because Cornwallis, when you go
Right.
see here,
And he's buried in India. So Rawdon has, I believe, left by that time, but he's generally given credit for laying conquest there. And he's buried on the wall in Malta, minus right hand. Tom.
The elephant in the room. How on earth did Rawdon get the nickname the ugliest man in the British?
I have no idea because,
I can't find that out either.
and I'll put this back up for anybody, or you can get my card, because the Joshua Reynolds, and I've cut it in half, the Joshua Reynolds portrait does not show the ugliest man in the British Army. This is 1789-90. I think it's a little old for 1789-90, but you know, he is Ian Saberton, who has forgotten more about the Cornwallis papers than I'll ever know in my life, actually mentions that in his youth, that Rawdon is quite athletic. And again, at 50, if you're marrying into beautiful royalty, I don't think you're doing it looking like the boo hag. So, yes.
I was going to say, I've seen some drawing of him that was supposed to say to be one of the more accurate likenesses.
Yeah.
He was ugly.
With that, other questions?
Well, I was going to say, did the ugliest man have anything to do with him being Irish?
You know, I thought about that. And it's interesting, even though he is Protestant Irish, the Irish Catholics, I'm sure, are not enamored with Lord Francis Rawdon. Even though, as a member of the Irish Parliament, favorable to Great Britain, favorable to the Crown, he does speak out and runs afoul of William Pitt because he criticizes the harshness in which the Irish are being treated with. All right, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Like Joan and Glenn and Adamant here in Camden are writing a book on life in Camden during that 11 months that the British controlled the town. Did you learn anything about Rawdon and what type of leadership he offered to this part of the state for civilians?
In terms of civilians, that was not really part of the research itself. I can't go either way, so I don't want to offer conjecture. I will say this. I'm going to give argument to this. Historic Camden needs to rename the Kershaw Cornwallis House. Cornwallis only spent a short amount of time there. Guess who spent the most amount of time as a British officer? Rawdon would have spent there. But by all accounts, he is competent in his leadership. In all accounts, again, he is having, and I hate to cross over wars here. This could be another talk. There is definite comparison between the British here in South Carolina and our experience in Vietnam. He is that last American commander who is trying to hold on with fewer and fewer resources, knowing that political and public opinion in Great Britain is turning against offensive operations, and he's trying to save this army when he withdraws from Camden in '96 versus defend every last inch. And I think that shows a commander that not only is strategically intelligent, but he understood the situation, that The time is running out. Do we have any other further questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you think Rawdon had anything to do with the British not torching the Joseph Kershaw house?
Again, I didn't run across that. And even though he does have that harsh comment, I've never found Rawdon really connected with any brutalities of war. You never hear him mentioning, burning down churches or towns, etc. I think as a gentleman, he would not have done that. He also, and maybe not he, but one of his officers, etc., were very gracious when some straggling patriots showed up at 96 after the army had left. So I think you see someone who is certainly conscious of the folly of continuing to torment civilians. Yes.
The victory of Rome at Hogwarts Hill, was it not a Puritan victory?
Well, again, it does drive Greene away, but yes, shortly thereafter he has to withdraw from that. But I think it should. But in his mind, he did not want to abandon. We mentioned the walking wounded and the walking ill. There are also the bedridden wounded and the bedridden ill. And had he not fought that and Greene taken the town, he would have lost soldiers that had been personally loyal to him and had fought for him in this type of hasty retreat.
Just want to mention one thing, the Irish Volunteers, they held the first St. Patrick's Day Parade in New York City in 1779.
So does that mean we need to cancel it?
I'm
gonna go call 5 points at y'all. Ixnay on the celebration. All right.
Good luck.
Last question.
Weren't the volunteers out of Pennsylvania?
They are at Philadelphia, yes, ma'am.
So would they have not been Scots Irish, Protestant Irish?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the composition, but I think it would be hard pressed for an Irish Catholic to be in the British Army. I think it would be also hard pressed for some Scot-Irish to be in the British Army. I think these are your Irish, your Scot-Irish Protestants, your Northern
There were
Ireland.
actually a few Catholics in
Yeah. All right.
Anyways, thank you guys. If you have any further questions, Mike said that he'll be around a little bit.
Yeah, I got a substitute, so I'm good.
Thank you guys. Okay, now, just to help him out, if you'd like to hear Mike Burgess come back to the Revolutionary War Visitor Center, please raise your hand so that way I can say, yes, we like having you here.
All right. Also, I do want to give a shout out to someone else you need to come here. Mr. Robert Riles over here, raise your hand, Robert.
Oh, he's coming.
Does this, when is he coming?
He's coming in November. He's already done Reverend Martin.
Yeah.
He's done William
You gonna
Tennant.
do William Martin again?
I could do Reverend Martin anytime.
So, if you have never seen his portrayal of Reverend William Martin, it's powerful enough to where I've seen him the last couple years at Waxhaws. I went to Winsboro. I watched the first presentation. I hung out in metropolitan Winsboro, and so I could see the second presentation because I had missed some. It is one of the most powerful portrayals telling the story of the Scot-Irish and the influence of religion on our revolution that we often tend to look and overlook and sort of shove to the background. So I am going to shamelessly plug him as being an incredible presenter. Yeah, all right, let's give him a hip hip huzzah. Hip hip! All right, thank you.
Thank